Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mixed Narrative. So excited to have you here as we officially kick off the first pilot episode. So for this episode, wanted to give you a little insight into what is this creative project? Why did this podcast get started? Where's my passion behind this? And so for those who don't know me, my name's Jessica Mitchell. I'll be sharing a bit more of who I am and my story. I am the host of this podcast. But for this episode, I have invited my friend, Ray White, to join for this episode. Ray and I go way back. We've done tons of leadership stuff together. We have dreamed together. We have had so many ideas in starting businesses and just being creative together. Ray is the host of his podcast called On the Mic with Ray White and does a variety of activities and just movement and change in his city where he's at. So excited to have him here to interview me to get a little insight into this podcast. So Ray, I'm going to pass it off to you to introduce yourself and get us going on this.
Jay Mitch, what up?
What's up?
I am very grateful that you've asked me to be your inaugural host to ask you questions about your podcast and on your platform. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'm excited just to learn more about what is this mixed narrative that you are embarking into, or you're already a part of, but just bringing light in the form of a podcast. But yeah, quick little deal about me, as Jay Mitch already stated. I have been doing a lot of dreaming. I'm an ideas guy, and it's great to do that with Jay Mitch as well, because we could spin up we have 12 ideas and 12 dreams in our heads, and it's just a matter of just taking action in that. But in addition to just the podcast itself, yes, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, actually in the Jay Mitch's hometown of Salem, Kaiser area, with my wife and two kids, two boys that are toddlers. And my day gig is leading in the healthcare IT space as a supervisor, but I have a passion for content creation, passion for finding ways to see culture and teams succeed and people succeed and build inclusive communities as well. So, but this is exciting. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming.
Yes. So we're going to dive right into this because there's quite a few questions that I have, being somebody who is new to the Mixed Narrative podcast and learning about this concept. I would love to hear, where did this idea come from? Tell me a little bit about the Mixed Narrative.
Yeah, so to really paint the picture of the mixed narrative idea, have to give a little bit of background of who I am. My dad is white and my mom is Puerto Rican Dominican. And, growing up, I knew that played a role in who I was and different things. There were different aspects of culture and upbringing that I pulled from either side. But as I've gotten older, I've recognized how much that has informed how I step into the world, how I live in the world, where my insecurities come from, a lack of a sense of belonging in any and all ethnic circles that I walk into, because in my very DNA and biology, there's a mixture. I am both a white woman and a Latina. I carry both, and there's both joy and shame and struggle that comes from that. So that's always kind of been a simmering feeling in my life. From a young age, I didn't know how to put words to it. As I've gotten older, it's been a little easier to unpack. And over the past few years, I've just been starting to put some language to it. And a huge turning point with it has just happened over the last couple years, and just really have leaned into, okay, how do I give voice to this feeling for myself, but then also create space for others in it.
Interesting. So the mixed narrative is a personal deal. Like this is you.
Yeah. This is my personal project coming up here. Probably a huge thing that kind of triggered this to bring me to action. Recently, I relocated. I born and raised for the most part in Salem, Oregon, as Ray mentioned, and over just about a year ago, I uprooted my life and moved to New York City, and was going to school here, still am. And the move kind of brought to surface a variety of things that I knew and felt but didn't have language to. And yeah, I was in a cultural anthropology class for my grad program, and we were talking about cultures and ethnicities, and there were tons of different backgrounds represented in the room. And as we're unpacking these things, I recognized that while I thought I was craving to be surrounded by diversity, where I felt most at home was talking with other people that had, you know, a biracial background, a multi-ethnic background, and I found connection in the moments of going, me too, when they would say, you know, I'm not um you know, Korean enough for this setting, and I'm too white for this setting, and you know, maybe they were African American and white, or we had a lot of you know, Chinese American, Haitian American, and these different backgrounds, and just had the opportunity to recognize there's a voice here that I haven't heard other people talking about either. And I want to give light to that for my own story, for my own healing, embracing who I am, but also elevating that for other people. So really moving to the city helped me to hold on to that, embrace it more, and figure out what does it look like to elevate that.
Mm, I love it. I love it. Those stories need to be told, yours and others who identify the same. That's awesome. So the name though, the name mixed narrative, like how did that come to light, and why is that going to be like the staple for what this podcast is going to be called?
Yeah, you know, like naming anything, you go back and forth and you write tons of ideas down, and you're like really excited about one thing, and then 2 days later you're like, that's trash. That's a horrible name. That's nobody's gonna like that. And so Ray was one of the recipients of all my ideas. You know, I dabbled through a lot of things, went through some of the logistic of like what's already out there that has a name. um and for me, I landed on mixed, because that is probably the word that I connect with the most when describing my own ethnic identity background. I lean more towards identifying myself as mixed rather than biracial. Sometimes I do multi-ethnic. So for me, just personally, that was one. So I knew it was going to be mixed something, you know, and so just started pairing like mixed what am I trying to elevate? And for me, as I've been reflecting on my own passions, even in this current cultural climate with social justice, racial equity, different things, and even the political divide that's happening, I kept coming back to just this love for stories and how stories are what help people understand. Stories are what help people empathize. Stories are what make people feel known. People share stories to be known. And this just kept running through my head over and over again. So started thinking through the mixed story, what does this look like, the mixed lens, how I see the world, and then just kind of landed on the mixed narrative, because that communicates both the story I'm trying to tell of myself, but also what's the narrative that happens in the mind, in the head, in the heart of people of mixed ethnic identity. Because what I realized is there's a lot of people who don't understand the narrative that's going on. There's a lot of people that don't understand the narrative of walking into a room and wondering, okay, what does this look like in terms of my very DNA, my ethnic background? How do I fit here more, and not really feeling a place that you do fit other than amongst other mixed people. I was listening to a podcast where somebody shared, you know, um, each person's background, you know, they have their own, um, struggles and stories when it comes to their race, their ethnic identity, and finding belonging there. And those who have been oppressed longer probably are more aware of their race and their background because it impacts their day to day. Those who may have privilege from that don't think about it as much. And they said, but those who are mixed think about it all the time
Mm.
because uh, there isn't a place that feels home, because other than maybe my siblings, nobody else has exact, mixed DNA to me. And so, yeah, it was really important to elevate that narrative from all ends, both for personal healing and growth, but also for other people.
Wow. The Mixed Narrative Podcast. I love it. The story behind the name that encourages the story behind who you are and other mixed identified, mixed ethnic identities within the world. Because having place and having community is truly important. And so creating a platform and space to allow that to be discussed and known and shared and celebrated is key. So, man, I love the fact that you're stepping into this, and this is great. And so, diving deeper into uh, the intended audience, like who is this podcast for? You've thrown out quite a few different names and people and identities, but I would
Yeah.
love to hear, who is this podcast truly for?
Yeah, this podcast is for those who they grew up with. They hold a mixed narrative. It's definitely I connect most, really want to cater with those who their literal DNA is mixed. They have a mixed biological aspect of who they are, but this will also venture into just being a connecting point for those who maybe they have more of a multi-ethnic mixed upbringing, in the sense that they were involved, they were in different cultures than maybe what their biology is. But it is for people that are mixed, for them to have that moment that I had when talking to a friend and go, me too, like you get it. You feel that, but at the same time, secondary, I would say it's for people who don't have the mixed narrative. It's for people to hear these stories that maybe haven't been told, to learn along the way, to connect, because I think it will benefit people as they listen and learn from different stories, to understand others, to know how to connect. So yeah, and I would say my main goal would be that those who are on and listen to the podcast that have a mixed ethnic identity background can feel a connection, can feel some healing through the process. Even those who come and share their stories can do that as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Man, all right, let's go. So I'm just on over here, just listening to it. I'm excited for this. I know this is the first episode, but for more stories to be told, your story, other stories of folks you bringing onto the podcast to interview them, and even just to be just to share. Like I feel like that's key. It's important. So if I am, so I'm, let's say I'm sitting on my couch, right? And I'm like, you know what? I'm really want to listen to this podcast. Where could I find this podcast? Like, how are you planning on distributing this out for people to listen to?
Yeah, you can basically find this podcast wherever your favorite podcast resource is. It'll be on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you go for a podcast, you will find the Mixed Narrative. You can also, track along on social media with me at jmitch09. That is JMITCH09. And I'll just be posting some links and insights to what's coming up with the podcast there. And you get a little sense of who I am there as well. And yeah, excited just to let this go out into the world as well.
Nice. All right. Final word. Final word about the mixed narrative. What is the one thing that you would want to ensure people, whether they are identify as mixed narrative or have a mixed narrative identity, or learning about the mixed narrative and those around them? What's the one thing you want them to grasp?
Yeah, I think this podcast is an invitation to feel at home and belonging for those of a mixed narrative. So there may be some people listening where their role, their involvement is going to be to listen to stories and feel seen and known and connected from there. There are others who maybe that'll be a step, but they also feel the need to share that story. There's going to be links and opportunities for you to reach out to me. Would love to have any and all people of mixed backgrounds be a part of this podcast and interviewing. And so I would say that is going to be part of it too. So both listening and sharing the mixed narrative for people in this community. So if you know people, if you are somebody with a mixed narrative, you want to be on this show, you want to share your story, I guess what they say, slide into my DMs, send some insight. Let me know. There will be, links in Google Forms that you can fill out as well, just to be part of this, and we'll distribute that in the weeks to come as well and get you more info there.
All right. The Mixed Narrative Podcast dropping into your favorite podcasting app real soon. Jay, Mitch, I'm super excited that you're taking a step into this journey and sharing your story and creating space to share stories for others. So let's go. Let's get out.
Yeah. Excited to do it. So want to invite all of you, please join the story, listen to the stories, be part of it. Pay attention. We're going to be dropping more episodes as they come. So do what you can to subscribe, to follow, to share, so you can just keep hearing more from the Mixed Narrative Podcast.